What are the most misquoted Bible verses taken out of context? I bet you're aware of several. But what is the number one misquoted prophetic verse that involves the return of Jesus? Misquoting this verse has led to dangerous false doctrines, some of which may even be taught in your church. Watch this episode to find out what verse 99% of Christians misquote and misuse. We're in the middle of a series on hidden prophecies. Some are truly hidden, in plain sight, like the owl on the screen, and others, like today's topic, are hidden because we misread and misquote them. If you want to see the other videos in this series, click on the banner or click on the link at the end of the video. Now, some of these misquoted verses are loved and cherished, just like no one knows the day or hour. Did you realize that is not what Matthew 24:36 says in context? The quote on the screen is taken completely out of context. So keep watching and you'll discover what it really does say and, most importantly, what it means. But not only Bible prophecies are misquoted and taken out of context. Here is a video from YouTuber Alan Parr about 5 other scriptures that are taken out of context. If you're interested, we put a link in the description below for our community because that's our topic today. But right now, we're going to concentrate on this individual prophecy taken out of context, Matthew 24:36, which many claim only says no one can know the day or hour. In fact, a famous billboard was set up with this exact out-of-context verse on it. Imagine that. The intention of the billboard now was good, but if we're going to quote the Bible, let's quote it correctly in context. The backstory on this billboard is that infamous preacher Harold Camping set a date for the return of Jesus in May 2011, and he set up hundreds of billboards announcing this date. After the failed date-setting rapture of May 2011, the billboard, with the out-of-context verse that we had just mentioned, attempted to set the record right. But did it? A few weeks ago, we published this popular video on what the writers of the Dead Sea Scrolls thought about the Second Coming and their predicted date for that event. If you haven't seen it, click on the banner. I think it's quite an interesting video. However, we received at least a half a dozen comments, probably more, mentioning Matthew 24:36 specifically and criticizing us for putting up the video. What is interesting is that every single one of these comments misapplied the verse out of context. Every single one. It was then that we decided this video was needed. So, what does Matthew 24:36 really say? But concerning that day and hour, no one knows. Not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only. To which you may be thinking, Nelson, that's the same thing as no one knows the day or hour. But it isn't. There is one huge and very important difference. Jesus actually said, quote, concerning that day and hour. It isn't a random day. It's a very specific day. It's that day. So, when we read our Bibles at home or we're sitting in our pew listening to our pastor and we hear that day, most of us think we know what that day is. Some of us think maybe it's the rapture. Some of us think it's the second coming. Some of us think it's both. But do we know? Do we really know what that day meant? Because grammatically, that day has to refer back to a day that Jesus had previously just spoken about in Matthew 24, a day from Matthew 24. And this is why the verse is taken out of context. The day and hour no one knows is a specific day. It is a day and hour in context of Matthew 24, not just any day. So what was the most significant day Jesus spoke about in Matthew 24? Then there will appear in heaven the sign of the Son of Man, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn. And they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory, and he will send out his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Matthew 24:30 through 31. And what was the last day that Jesus had just spoken about in Matthew 24? This same day, verses 30 through 31. The most significant day in all of history, the day Jesus returns. That day, the day of the Lord. What doesn't Matthew 24:36 refer to? Well, it can't refer to any day that Jesus did not talk about. For instance, this verse can't refer to a pre-tribulation rapture. Jesus doesn't mention a pre-trib rapture in any of his teachings in Matthew 24 or elsewhere, so this verse cannot, under any circumstance, refer to that, which is a huge misconception in the church. Now, this video isn't about rapture timing, at least not about its correct timing. However, if you are pre-trib, please know that this verse, Matthew 24:36, has nothing to do with a pre-trib rapture, as you have just seen. It's about the day Jesus comes on the clouds and sends his angels to gather the elect. This also means the verse has nothing to do with a mid-trib rapture, at the midpoint. And surprisingly to some, it has nothing to do with a post-trib rapture at the very end of the 70th week, when Jesus returns to fight Armageddon either. Revelation 19:11 through 15, when Jesus returns to fight Armageddon, isn't found in Matthew 24. This event, this day, happens prior to Jesus' return to fight Armageddon. Wow. Now, almost everyone probably wants to stop me right here and say, wait a minute, Matthew 24:31 is the last day of the 70th week or the tribulation. But it is not. This is another misconception, maybe the biggest misconception in the church. Matthew 24:31 is the same event as depicted in Revelation 6:12 through 7:9 and Revelation 14:14 through 16. And this event happens prior to a single trumpet judgment or a single bowl being poured out. Notice in Matthew 24, Jesus is asked for the signs that precede his coming, and he gives them. He mentions all of the first 6 seals. But he doesn't mention a single trumpet judgment or bowl judgment. Have you ever noticed that? Go back and read Matthew 24, and you'll see that not a single trumpet or bowl judgment is mentioned in all of Matthew 24. So Jesus coming on the clouds is prior to those things. In addition to the link to Alan Parr's video down in the description, we also have a link to a playlist of a series of several videos that will prove this theory to you. Some of them are mine, some of them are from other teachers, like Alan Kirshner or Zion's Fire. There is a video on why Matthew 24:31 is not the same as Revelation 19. In fact, there are 2 videos on that subject. And there is a video on how long prior to the end of the tribulation Matthew 24:31 is, and several others. If you want to see these crucial videos, there is a link down in the description, as well as a link at the end of the video. So if you're struggling with what I just said about Matthew 24:31 not being the same event as when Jesus returns to fight Armageddon, please take a look at these series of videos. Now you can probably see why I estimated that 99% of Christians have been mistaken about this verse. Matthew 24:36, because it is nearly everyone. Nearly everyone falls into one of these categories, either pre-trib, mid-trib, or post-trib. Now, let us examine one other thing about this verse. Jesus said concerning that day that no one knows, it is the day and hour that Jesus said we cannot know. Not the week, not the month, or not the year. Those things apparently we can know. Now, this is not splitting hairs or making an overfine distinction. Jesus was pretty specific. He said the day and the hour. Now, that exact day and that exact hour are listed for us in Revelation. Most people don't know that, and we will show you where in a minute or so. Now, this doesn't mean a specific day like June 17th at 4 o'clock, but the exact biblical events that happen surrounding that date. That's what Revelation lists. However, first, let's look at the implications of not knowing the day, but perhaps knowing the year. This verse, Matthew 24:36, is found in the overall context of Matthew 24, the Olivet Discourse. The disciples asked Jesus what would be the sign of his coming and the end of the age. Jesus gave them a number of not signs, things like wars, famines, and earthquakes that are not the sign of his coming. He then gave them the one sign to look for. When you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, let the reader understand, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Jesus told us when we see the abomination of desolation, which the prophet Daniel tells us is at the midpoint of a tribulation period, then we can know that Jesus' coming is less than 3.5 years away. This allows Christians who see that sign to know the approximate timing. The wise will know the year. Some might even know the month, and some might guess at what the week is. It is only the day and hour we cannot know. But we can't know any of that with certainty until after the abomination of desolation, when the Antichrist sits in the temple, probably upon the mercy seat, declaring himself to be God. Why can't we know the day or hour? Well, certainly the main reason is that it's God's will that we not know it. But there may be practical reasons as well. One possibility is that many believe Jesus' coming on the clouds of Matthew 24:30 will be on the Jewish feast of Yom Teruah, the unknown day, the day that no man knows. This is a day determined by the sighting of the new moon, a sighting that can take place on either of 2 days. So no one could know the day or the hour of that unknown day until the moon is sighted. Now, Matthew 24:36 also says, concerning that day and hour, no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only. This causes great consternation among Christians. How is it that Jesus can't know that day and only God the Father? Is Jesus limited in some ways? Now, the Greek word know in this verse is eido, which properly means to see with physical eyes. It can also mean to know because we see, or even to know metaphorically. It would be like, well, I see what you mean. Now, the translators of our Bible had to choose one of these 3 meanings when they decided how to translate Matthew 24:36. They had to choose to literally see, to know because we could see, or to know. And because they likely didn't know the link between Yom Teruah, which involves seeing the new moon, well, they chose know as the best translation. No one knows, not even the angels. But what if the proper translation is Ito's literal translation? Maybe it is only God the Father that can see the new moon and announce the day of the Lord. Remember, the sun and the moon go dark on this day, as we have seen in Matthew 24:29. So, what if we try to translate the verse concerning that day and hour no one sees, not the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only? On this day with no sun or moon, how does an angel or a human see the new moon? In terms of why Jesus can't see it, I have no real idea, but perhaps he has self-limited himself because he's in a human body, and that God the Father truly is the only one who sees when it's the new moon. Another issue about humans not knowing the day or hour might involve the Jewish calendar. Remember, Yom Teruah is a date on the Jewish calendar. And it is likely, in my opinion, very likely, that our conception of what the proper Jewish calendar should be may be mistaken. Maybe Yom Teruah is a month later than we think it should be. That would certainly lead to someone not knowing the day or the hour, wouldn't it? Then, of course, there is the very real possibility that Jesus returns on another day entirely. Maybe it's not Yom Teruah at all, but some other day. Obviously, we wouldn't know that either, would we? Yom Teruah is only an educated guess on our parts. So after the sign of the abomination of desolation, the return of Jesus becomes imminent. That means it can happen at any time. We know it will happen in less than 3.5 years after that sign, but we really don't know how much less. Now, imminency is a word that gets thrown around a lot in Christian culture today. Some people say the return of Jesus is imminent right now, which it is not. The sign of the abomination of desolation must take place first, as we see in Matthew 24. So when Jesus says in Matthew 24, "Therefore stay awake, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming," or "Therefore you must also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect," he is talking about the day and the hour of that day, the day of Matthew 24:36. Notice it is a day and an hour, and it's those things we cannot know. And now, as we promised, we're going to show you what Revelation has to say about the events surrounding this day and hour. Let's look at the day first. "For the great day of their wrath has come, and who can stand?" Revelation 6:17. There it is, the day. It's the great day, the great and terrible day of the Lord. This is the same day that the sun and moon are darkened, just as we saw in Matthew 24. These events are pictured in Revelation 6:12-14. And it's the same day that the unrighteous see Jesus coming on the clouds and hide in the rocks and the caves of the earth to be hid from his wrath. And the angels of Revelation 14 tell us about the hour. "And he said with a loud voice, 'Fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come. And put in your sickle and reap, for the hour to reap has come, for the harvest of the earth is fully ripe.'" There are two references to that exact hour. Now, right now, we can't say what day that is or what hour it is. We can't say, for instance, September 17th, 2031 at 12 a.m., for instance. That's not the day, by the way. That was Camping's mistake. But we know the day and the hour in the book of Revelation. 3 witnesses give us that day and also show us that Revelation 6:12-17 are the same events. as Revelation chapter 14, an amazingly important piece of information. We have a video on that subject. Click on the banner if you want to see it. Which brings us to our brand new video series on the coming third temple in Jerusalem. In the first video, we're going to explore whether it will begin as a fully built temple or just a tent or tabernacle. What does the Bible say about this, and which one should we be looking for? If you want to keep watching, click right here. If you want to take a moment to see the complete playlist of all the videos about the timing of Jesus' coming on the clouds that we discussed earlier, you can click over here. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell notification so that when new videos come out, you can be notified and not miss an episode. Till then, this is Nelson, and I'll see you there.